Howdy, it's Jen Tozer, your portfolio manager here, and we are in the middle of our Stampede Week, which is just a great excuse out in Calgary to put on your Western wear and go see the rodeo. And if you've never done it, put it on your bucket list. It's a lot of fun. So what I wanted to talk about today was the bill that's come out of the US that's been working its way through Congress and the Senate, the big, bad, beautiful bill. And that's really the Trump administration's first crack at a budget, talking about tax cuts, talking about spending, all of these things. And what I wanted to focus on is the little bit that could affect us directly, which is the potential change in taxation that we would experience on our US stocks. So currently, US stocks that are dividend paying in our accounts are subject to 15% withholding tax, which is fine because then when you file your tax return, we have a tax treaty and it all works out in the wash. There are some concerns that in January, if this bill passes into law or when it passes into law, some of these features may go away. There's a concern that withholding tax may be as high as 50%, and there is a concern that potentially there may be double taxation. So let's start by talking about the magnitude of what this would mean for us. The yield on the US stock market is not very high. The dividend yield currently is 1.32% on the US stocks that we own. So for every $1 million that you have invested, that's $13,000 that you receive in dividend income. And if you look at a year like 2024, that was against $250,000 of total profit. So that's the first point. The second point is if you have a dividend withholding tax now of 50%, now you've lost $6,000. And then is there going to be a treaty? I don't know. So potentially you could have a 1 to 1.5% leakage in the worst situation, which means your dividends are nullified. But if that were to happen, I'm going to tell you that I'm not overly worried about that as long as that is going to persist. And here's why. Banks are excellent at creating financial instruments to get around these types of tax inefficiencies. So for example, currently in the US, you can buy an ADR, which stands for an American Depository Receipt, because it's too expensive to go buy your shares of Taiwan Semiconductors directly on their Asian exchange. And if you think way, way back prior to 2000, you couldn't have any foreign content in your RSP. So what did the banks get really good at doing and the mutual fund companies doing? They started creating instruments. We used to call them the S&P 500 RSP version, where it had a series of contracts inside. So technically it all counted as Canadian content, but there was a US portion. So you actually got the US returns and it counted as Canadian content. It's not too hard for me to see how they will be able to easily flip that around and say it's a US investment, so therefore it's not subject to US withholding tax, and then it presents itself in a Canadian portfolio. So financial engineering is something we're very good at in Canada. And I can tell you that since Canadians invest so much in the US market and it would be profitable for banks to do this, I would expect that if the worst case scenario shows up, which is 50% withholding tax, and some type of double taxation, we're going to see some innovation in financial products. Other than that, everything is great. I hope you're having a lovely day, and as always, give me a call.